Have you ever sat on your porch at dusk, a glass of sweet tea in hand, and wondered where the years went? Hey there, friends, it's Eva, your 65-year-old neighbor from Eufaula, Alabama. Where the lake sparkles and the magnolias bloom, I'm here, cozy in my rocker, ready to share a story that's close to my heart, like we're swapping tales at a church potluck. You all know how life can surprise you, especially when family's involved. Sometimes it's love, sometimes it's lessons. So, pull up a chair, maybe grab a cookie, and let's talk, just us girls who've seen a few seasons. If you're enjoying these heart-to-hearts, hit that subscribe button to join our little circle. And drop a comment. How's your heart holding up these days? Let's get started, shall we? The late afternoon sun spilled through my lavender curtains, casting a warm, golden glow across the living room, as if it was begging me to stay. I stood there, 61 years old, in the middle of the apartment I'd called home for 32 years. A small piece of paper in my hand, pencil trembling as I wrote, "Love this place like I did," I scribbled, folding the note and setting it on the kitchen counter. My suitcase waited quietly by the door, like an old friend ready for a journey no one saw coming. Outside, the streets of Columbus, Ohio, were settling into dusk, the hum of distant traffic mingling with the chirping of sparrows on my balcony. But in my heart, one question kept circling: how did I get here? From a mother who gave everything to a woman choosing to walk away from her own son, this apartment, with its faded red brick walls and creaky hardwood floors, wasn't just a place to live. It was my story, George's story, and Daniel's. I looked at the oak bookshelf in the corner, the one George built one crisp fall afternoon in 1985 when we first moved in. "Mary, look at this beauty, it'll stand for 100 years, he'd laughed, his flannel shirt dusted with sawdust, while Daniel, barely 3, toddled around with a toy hammer. Now, that bookshelf stood firm, holding family photos, worn paperbacks, and dreams I once thought would last forever. But today, it gazed at me like a warning, whispering, "Mary, it's time to go." I stepped to the window, pulling the curtain aside, letting the sunlight warm my hands. The faint scent of lavender rose from the fabric, reminding me of evenings spent sewing under a yellow lamp, patching Daniel's jackets, or stitching new curtains when money was tight. Every stitch was a promise to give my boy a good life. But Daniel, the child who once hugged me and said, "You're the best," Mom, stood up at my birthday dinner, under flickering candlelight, and declared this apartment my home, George's home. The place of our slow dances to Moon River on the old radio now belonged to him and Ashley, his wife, with a smile as sweet as honey, but eyes as cold as winter. I wasn't angry, or maybe I was too tired for anger, but my heart ached, the kind of ache I felt the night George left this world, leaving me with an apartment full of memories and a son I swore to protect. I thought Daniel needed me, the way I needed him to keep going after loss. I paid his college tuition when he lost his scholarship, covered half the wedding with Ashley's fancy flowers, even loaned them money for IVF treatments I now know never happened. But at that birthday dinner, when Daniel clinked his wine glass and said, "Mom doesn't need all this space anymore," I realized I wasn't his mother in his eyes. I was an obstacle, a name on a deed, something to move aside for their plans. I sank into the armchair, my fingers brushing the worn fabric where George used to sit, reading the Sunday paper, the smell of Folgers coffee lingering in the air. Outside, an old Ford pickup rumbled by, its headlights sweeping across the window, startling me. I checked the front door, then checked it again, as if afraid someone might barge in and take what little I had left. But the truth was, they'd already taken it not by breaking in, but with sweet words, Instagram posts, and legal papers I never saw coming. I found an old power of attorney in a drawer, signed when I was in the hospital with pneumonia 2 years ago. Daniel's name in bold. Just for insurance stuff, "Mom," he'd said, and I, exhausted with an IV in my arm, signed without reading. Now that paper was a knife, ready to cut away my freedom if I didn't act. I called Iris, my old friend who lives out in the suburbs, spending her days tending roses and ignoring texts from her ex-husband. The phone rang twice before she picked up, her voice warm as the Lipton tea she always sips. "Mary, what's got you calling this late?" she asked, and I poured it all out, from the birthday dinner to the power of attorney, my voice shaking like the leaves outside my window. "They want my apartment." "Iris," I said. They didn't ask, just announced it. "I don't know if I'm strong enough to fight them." Iris was quiet for a moment, then spoke, her voice steady as the oak tree in her yard. "Mary, you're stronger than you know. I lost my family's land trusting my brother, but I got back up. You will too. Don't let them take what you've built." I nodded, though she couldn't see, and felt a tiny ray of sunlight creep into my heart. "Thank you, Iris." I said, "I'll try." She chuckled softly. "You don't try, Mary. You do, and don't look back." Iris's words echoed as I stood, walking to the kitchen counter where my note still sat. I looked around the apartment one last time, my eyes tracing the bookshelf, the photo of George smiling in his flannel, the old radio silent in the corner. I flicked it on, hoping for a familiar tune, and Moon River crackled through. Faint but enough to pull me back to those fall nights when George took my hand for a slow dance, Daniel asleep on the couch. I closed my eyes, letting the melody hold me, then turned it off. It was time to go. I pulled my suitcase to the door, locked the apartment, and started down the stairs. Each step a goodbye. Outside, the October air was crisp, the smell of fallen leaves mixing with a gentle breeze. I dragged my suitcase across the cracked sidewalk, the wheels' soft rumble the only sound in the quiet street at 4:35 a.m. The sky was still dark, but I knew, somewhere ahead, a place was waiting, a small cabin by Lake Erie, where I could plant lavender, listen to the waves, and call it home again. I didn't look back, not out of anger, but because I knew, even at this age, I deserved to start over. The streets of Columbus were hushed, the glow of streetlights casting shadows on the red brick buildings. I thought of Daniel, his eyes at the dinner, not love but calculation. I thought of Ashley, with her perfect smile and Instagram posts, turning my apartment into Grandma's legacy without a single word to me. I thought of George, wondering what he'd say if he saw me now. "Mary," I heard his voice in my mind. "You're the strongest person I know. Go find your sunshine." At the street corner, an early bus rolled by, its dim lights brushing my face. I stopped, took a deep breath, and felt like I was breathing for the first time in months. I wasn't running away. I was choosing myself, and though my heart hurt, I knew, deep down, this was the right path. A cabin by the lake, a patch of lavender, a mug of mint tea in the morning sun, those small things were waiting. And I deserved them. I kept walking, suitcase rolling behind me, and for the first time in years, I felt lighter. The apartment, with its bookshelf, lavender curtains, and memories, now belonged to someone else, but the peace I carried with me was mine alone. And no one, not Daniel, not Ashley, not even the whispers of the past could take it away. If this story touches you, I hope you'll hit that subscribe button to follow my journey. I don't promise perfect stories, but I promise to tell them true. From the heart of a mother, a woman, at 61 still learning to love herself again, and in the comments, please share. Have you ever had to make a tough choice to protect your heart? Your stories are a light, and I'd love to hear them. The memory of that evening sits in my chest like a stone, heavy and cold, no matter how many times I try to let it go. It was my 61st birthday, just a few months before I packed my suitcase and left Columbus behind. All I wanted was a quiet dinner. Nothing fancy, just a table with my son Daniel, his wife Ashley, and a few dear friends. Good food, warm laughter, maybe a glass of wine raised to another year of holding myself together. I pictured us at a cozy restaurant, the kind with soft lights and the smell of fresh-baked bread, sharing stories like we used to back when Daniel was little. But instead, that night broke something in me, and I'm still piecing it back together, one memory at a time. The restaurant Ashley picked was one of those trendy spots in Columbus, all exposed brick walls and Edison bulbs dangling from the ceiling like fireflies. The air smelled of rosemary and sizzling steak, and the servers, young folks with easy smiles, kept calling me ma'am in that polite Ohio way. I wore my favorite navy dress, the one George always said made my eyes sparkle, and a pair of low heels I hadn't dusted off in years. As I settled into my chair, the chatter of the restaurant wrapped around me like a familiar quilt. Joan, my friend from church, sat across from me, her silver hair catching the light as she leaned in to say, "Mary, you don't look a day over 50, bless your heart." I laughed, waving her off, but her warmth felt like home. Daniel and Ashley arrived a little late, all apologies and bright smiles. Daniel, with his father's broad shoulders, gave me a quick hug, his cologne sharp and unfamiliar. Ashley, in a flowy dress that screamed boutique chic, kissed my cheek and said, "Happy birthday." "Mary, you're gonna love this place." Her voice was sweet as pecan pie, but there was something in her eyes, a flicker I couldn't quite place. I brushed it off, telling myself I was just tired. After all, this was my son and his wife, the family I'd poured my heart into. What could go wrong on a night like this? The table was lively, with Joan telling stories about her grandkids and Frank, another church friend, joking about his fishing trips on Lake Erie. I sipped my iced tea sweet, the way they make it here, and let the moment sink in. For a second, I could almost hear George's laugh, see him raising a glass of cheap Merlot, saying, "To Mary, the glue that holds us all together." I blinked the thought away, focusing on the menu, the clink of silverware, the hum of life around me. Then Ashley reached into her bag, pulling out a gift wrapped in tissue paper, fluffed up like a peacock's tail. "This is for you, Mary," she said, her smile wide, her manicured nails catching the candlelight. I took the bag, my fingers brushing the soft paper, and pulled out a tiny baby onesie, white with blue letters that read, "Best grandma ever." The table went quiet, all eyes on me. I stared at the onesie, my heart skipping a beat. "We thought it was time," Ashley said, her voice dripping with excitement, "to start planning the nursery." "Right. Daniel?" Daniel nodded, his smile calm, almost too perfect, like he'd practiced it in a mirror. "Yeah," he said, leaning back in his chair, "especially since we'll have more space soon." I blinked, the words not quite landing. More space. My mind raced, trying to catch up. Ashley leaned across the table, her eyes locked on mine. "We're just so grateful you agreed." "Mary," she said, her tone soft but pointed. "Not every mom would be this generous. You know." The air felt thick, like the moment before a storm. Joan raised an eyebrow, glancing at me, her fork hovering over her salad. Frank cleared his throat, looking confused. I opened my mouth to speak, to ask what on earth they meant. But before I could, Daniel stood up, tapping his spoon against his wine glass. The sharp clink cut through the restaurant's hum. And even the servers paused, heads turning our way. "Everyone. Can I have your attention for a sec?" Daniel said, his voice loud enough to carry, a showman's grin on his face. "Before we get started, if you're on social media, give us a like and follow. And hey, maybe share one life lesson you've learned the hard way. Drop it in the comments later." "All right." A few people chuckled, thinking it was a joke, but I saw Ashley pull out her phone, the little red light blinking as she started recording. My stomach twisted. This wasn't my Daniel, the boy who used to beg for extra cookies in our kitchen. This was someone else, someone performing. Tonight's not just about celebrating my incredible mum's birthday. Daniel went on, his eyes sweeping the table but avoiding mine. It's about a big change for our family. He paused, letting the words hang, and Ashley's camera stayed steady on him. We're moving into Mom's apartment, he said, his voice bright, like he was announcing a lottery win. It just makes sense. She doesn't need all that space anymore. And we're starting a family. It's such a gift, honestly, so generous. Let's raise a glass to the woman who made it happen. Glasses clinked. Voices murmured agreement, but I didn't move. My fork hung limp in my hand, the mashed potatoes on my plate turning cold. Daniel looked at me, his smile too wide, too hard. Right. Mom, he said, and the weight of every eye at the table pressed down on me. Ashley's phone was on me now, the lens like a spotlight. I felt like I'd been shoved onto a stage. No script, no lines, just a crowd waiting for me to play my part. I nodded, not because I agreed, but because I froze. My brain couldn't find the words, couldn't push back against the trap snapping shut around me. I forced a smile, my lips trembling, and took a sip of my tea. The sweetness bitter in my throat. The table moved on, chatter picking up. But I was stuck, the blood draining from my face, the meal turning to cardboard in my mouth. Ashley launched into plans for the apartment, her voice bubbling like she was on a home makeover show. We're thinking soft grey for the walls, maybe a crib in the corner, she said, waving her hands. Those old curtains, you know, the flowery ones, got to go. But don't worry. Mary, we'll let you visit. You can keep your plants on the balcony if you want. She laughed, a tinkling sound that grated my nerves. Daniel chimed in. We'll give you plenty of time to move. Mom, no pressure. No pressure. The words echoed in my head as I sat there, my hands folded in my lap, nails digging into my palms. They hadn't asked me, not once. They'd decided, declared. Announced to my friends that my home, the place I'd shared with George for 30 years, where I'd cried over his hospital bills, fixed a burst pipe with my own hands, danced to Moon River under a single bulb was now their starter nursery. My home, reduced to a Pinterest board. I glanced at Joan, hoping for a lifeline. But she was watching Ashley, her brow furrowed, like she wasn't sure what to make of it. Frank was cutting his steak, oblivious. I wanted to scream, to say, "This is my home, not yours," but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I excused myself halfway through dessert, my voice barely a whisper. "I'm not feeling well," I said, pushing my chair back. Daniel gave me a look, half annoyed, like I was being dramatic. Ashley offered to call an Uber, her smile never wavering. "No, thank you," I said, grabbing my purse. "I'll walk." The night air hit me like a slap as I stepped onto the Columbus sidewalk, my heels clicking against the pavement. I hadn't worn these shoes in years. And by the third block, my toes were blistered, my chest burning. But I kept going. The city lights blurred through tears I wouldn't let fall. And the chatter of passers-by faded into a dull hum. I thought of George, how he'd hold my hand on walks like this, his voice soft as he said, "Mary, we'll figure it out, whatever it is." But George was gone, and Daniel, my boy, had stood in that restaurant and taken my home without a second thought. Back in my apartment. I locked the door, checked it twice, then sank into the kitchen chair, my hands flat against the cool countertop. The clock ticked, loud in the silence, and I stared at the photo of George on the bookshelf, his grin frozen in time. "What do I do now?" I whispered, as if he could answer. The lavender curtains swayed in the breeze, and for a moment, I was back in 1985 painting these walls with him, Daniel giggling at our feet. But that was then. Now, my home felt like a stranger's, and I wasn't sure I could ever feel safe here again. The quiet of my apartment used to feel like a hug, a soft place to land after a long day. But that night, after the birthday dinner, it felt like a stranger's house, cold and unfamiliar, as if the walls themselves knew something I didn't. I stood in the kitchen, my navy dress still clinging to me, the blisters on my feet throbbing from that 3-block walk in heels I had no business wearing. The clock on the wall ticked too loud, each second a reminder of what had just happened. Daniel's voice echoed in my head, his wine glass raised, his words sharp as a blade. Mom doesn't need all this space anymore. Ashley's smile, bright and practiced, followed close behind, her phone recording every second of my shock. I checked the front door, turned the lock, then checked it again, my hands shaking. For the first time in 32 years, this apartment in Columbus, Ohio, didn't feel like mine. I sank into a chair at the kitchen table, the same table where George and I used to sip Folger's coffee on Sunday mornings, the smell of his pancakes filling the air. The countertop was cool under my palms, grounding me as I tried to make sense of it all. How could Daniel, my only child, the boy I'd rocked to sleep through fevers and thunderstorms, stand up in front of my friends and claim my home? How could Ashley, with her sweet as honey laugh, talk about tearing down my lavender curtains like they were nothing? I looked across the room at the bookshelf George built, its oak shelves holding photos of us, George in his flannel, Daniel in his Little League uniform, me smiling like I had the world figured out. Those pictures used to feel like memories. Now, they felt like warnings. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at nothing, my heart heavy as the old radio in the corner. It was the same radio that used to play Moon River on quiet evenings, when George would pull me up for a slow dance, his hands warm on my waist, Daniel giggling from the couch. I thought about turning it on, hoping the music might bring me back to those days, but I couldn't move. My body felt glued to the chair, my mind replaying the dinner, the clink of glasses, the weight of everyone's eyes, my own silence when I should have spoken up. "You agreed, Mary," Ashley had said, her voice so sure, like she'd already written the story and I was just a character in it. But I hadn't agreed. Not with words, not with a look, not with anything, and yet I'd let it happen, let them spin their tale right in front of me. That was my mistake, and it burned like a coal in my chest. Finally, I stood, my legs wobbly, and shuffled to the living room. The lavender curtains swayed in the breeze from an open window, their faint scent mixing with the crisp October air. I closed the window, double-checked the latch, and turned to the bookshelf. My fingers brushed the frame of a photo George and me at a church picnic. Not him grinning with a hot dog in hand, me laughing as Daniel smeared ketchup on his shirt. I wanted to climb into that moment, to stay where love was simple and my family was whole. But the present pulled me back, sharp and unforgiving. I don't know what made me do it, but I opened the drawer in the desk beside the bookshelf, one I hadn't touched in months. It was George's drawer, where he kept his papers, bills, warranties, the little things he was always so careful about. Since his funeral, I'd avoided it, the weight of his absence too much to bear. But that night, something told me to look. I pulled out a stack of folders, their edges yellowed, and started flipping through. There were tax returns, a warranty for our old Chevy, a handwritten list of emergency contacts in George's neat script, and then, tucked in the back, I found it a single sheet of paper, folded once, with the words "Power of Attorney" typed at the top. My breath caught. I unfolded it, my hands trembling as I read. It was dated 2 years ago, when I'd been in the hospital with pneumonia, hooked up to an IV and too weak to argue. Daniel had brought a stack of forms, saying, "Just sign these, Mom, so I can handle the insurance stuff." I'd scribbled my name, barely glancing at the pages, trusting him the way I always had. But this wasn't about insurance. It gave him authority to make decisions for me if I was incapacitated. His name, Daniel James Harper, stared back at me in black ink, and my stomach turned. This wasn't a mistake, it wasn't a guess, it was a plan. I sat back down, the paper clutched in my hand, and felt the room tilt, the ticking clock, the hum of the fridge, the distant rumble of a car on the Columbus street outside. It all faded, replaced by a single thought: Daniel wasn't asking for my apartment. He was taking it, and this paper was his weapon. I thought of his eyes at the dinner, not warm like they used to be, but expectant, like I was a check he was waiting to cash. I thought of Ashley, her phone always ready, filming my every reaction like she was building a case. My home, my safe place, the place I'd fixed a burst pipe with my own hands. Cried over George's hospital bills, laughed with Daniel over Saturday cartoons. It wasn't mine anymore, not in their eyes. I grabbed my phone, my fingers fumbling as I texted Ellen. My lawyer, who'd helped with George's estate, found a power of attorney with Daniel's name. I typed, "Is it still valid?" It was past midnight, but I hit send, my heart pounding. I didn't expect a reply until morning, but Ellen's name lit up my screen within minutes. "If you didn't revoke it," "Yes," she wrote, "Call me first thing tomorrow. We need to talk." I stared at the words, my throat tight. This wasn't just about the apartment. It was about my life, my freedom, everything I'd fought to hold on to since George left. Sleep didn't come that night, not even for a second. I sat on the couch, wrapped in the old quilt George's mother made, staring at the dark window. The lavender curtains hung still, their soft purple catching the glow of a streetlight outside. I kept seeing Daniel's face, the way he clinked his glass, the way he said, "Let's raise a glass to Mom." Not to me. Not really, just to the idea of me. The mother who was supposed to nod and hand over everything. Ashley's voice looped in my head too. Her laugh about my old lady curtains. Her plans for a crib where my sewing room stood. I wanted to scream, to call Daniel and demand answers, but I knew it wouldn't change a thing. They'd made their choice and I had to make mine. By dawn, the apartment was bathed in soft grey light, the kind that makes everything look fragile. I made a pot of Folgers, the familiar hiss of the coffee maker a small comfort, and sat at the kitchen table with a notebook. I started writing, not because I knew what to say, but because I needed to prove I was still here, still sharp, still me. October 15th, I wrote, "Daniel and Ashley announced they're taking the apartment. No discussion. Found power of attorney. Called Ellen." My handwriting was shaky, but it was mine, and that felt like a victory. I even jotted down a grocery list: milk, eggs, bread, just to timestamp my thoughts, to show I wasn't losing my mind, no matter what anyone might claim. I thought about calling Joan, my friend from the dinner, to tell her what happened, but I stopped myself. What if she believed them? What if she saw Ashley's Instagram post? I hadn't checked, but I knew it was there, some polished video of my living room, captioned with lies about Grandma's gift. The thought made my chest ache, like I was losing more than just my home. I remembered a moment from years ago, 1995, when Daniel had the flu, and I stayed up all night, cooling his forehead with a damp cloth, whispering, "You're going to be okay, sweetheart." He'd clung to my hand, his small fingers warm and trusting. Where was that boy now? Had I done something to push him away, to turn him into this stranger who saw me as a means to an end? I stood, walking to the bookshelf again, and picked up a photo of Daniel at 10, in his Little League uniform, his grin wide as he held a trophy. I wanted to cry, to beg that boy to come back, but the tears wouldn't come. Instead, I felt a spark, small but fierce, deep in my core. I wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. George used to say, "Mary, you're the strongest person I know." And I could almost hear him now, urging me to fight, not with shouts or arguments, but with the quiet strength I'd always had, the kind that got me through his illness, through raising Daniel alone, through every storm life threw my way. I set the photo down and picked up my phone, dialing Ellen's number. She answered on the second ring, her voice calm but firm. "Mary, you okay?" she asked, and I could hear the rustle of papers, like she was already at her desk. "I don't know. Ellen," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. How could my own son do this? That paper, it's like he's been planning it. Ellen paused, then said, "It's not your son. Mary, it's greed, and it's not personal, even if it feels that way. We'll fix this, but you need to come in today. Bring every document you've got." "Okay," I said, my voice steadier now. "I'll be there by 9. I hung up, looking around the apartment one more time. The lavender curtains, the bookshelf, the kitchen table, they were still here. But they didn't feel like mine anymore. I wasn't sure what came next, but I knew one thing: I wasn't going to let Daniel and Ashley write the end of my story, not without a fight. The morning sun slipped through my lavender curtains, painting the living room in soft stripes of light, but it didn't feel like a new day. It was 3 days after my 61st birthday. 3 days since Daniel stood up in that Columbus restaurant and declared my apartment his. 3 days since I found that old power of attorney with his name on it. I sat at the kitchen table, a mug of Folgers coffee gone cold in my hands, staring at the notebook where I'd scribbled my thoughts to keep my mind sharp. October 18th. I'd written, "Met Ellen. She says we can revoke the document, but I need to be careful." Careful. The word felt heavy, like a warning stitched into the air of this apartment that no longer felt like home. I'd spent those 3 days in a fog, jumping at every creak of the floorboards, checking the door lock more times than I could count. The bookshelf George built stood in the corner, its oak shelves holding photos that used to make me smile at George at our church picnic. Daniel in his Little League cap, me with a perm and a grin from the 80s. Now, they watched me like ghosts, reminding me of a life that seemed to be slipping away. I kept hearing Ashley's voice from the dinner, her laugh about my old lady curtains, her plans to turn my sewing room into a nursery. Every word was a needle, pricking at the life I'd built here, the life I thought I'd share with my son and his family. The doorbell rang, sharp and sudden, pulling me out of my thoughts. I froze, my heart thudding. Who'd come by without calling? I tiptoed to the door, peering through the peephole, and there she was, Ashley, standing in the hallway with a smile as bright as a toothpaste ad, holding a Starbucks cup and a white gift bag. Her blonde hair was pulled into a neat bun, her lipstick perfect, like she'd stepped out of one of those Instagram posts she loved so much. I hesitated, my hand on the knob. Part of me wanted to ignore her, to let her stand there until she gave up. But another part, the part that still hoped for the girl I'd welcomed at her engagement party, made me open the door, just halfway. Mary Ashley chirped, her voice sweet as pecan pie. "I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd pop by to check on you. You've been so quiet since the dinner." She held out the Starbucks cup. The label scrawled with Marian marker, though they'd spelled it with an I-E. "Your favorite hazelnut latte, extra ice, right." I didn't take the cup, my fingers tight on the doorframe. "You didn't text first," I said, my voice flatter than I meant it to be. She laughed, a light, tinkling sound that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, you know me, I'm all about surprises. I figured it'd be nice to see you." She pushed the gift bag toward me, her smile never wavering. "Go on, open it. Just a little something." I took the bag, more to keep the moment from stretching than because I wanted it. Inside was a bottle of prenatal vitamins, the label shiny and new. I looked up, confused, and Ashley placed a hand on her stomach, her eyes wide, like she was sharing a secret. "We're hoping," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "You already knew." "Though, right." From the dinner, my mouth went dry. "You're pregnant?" I asked, the words feeling foreign. She nodded, her hand still on her stomach, dramatic as a soap opera star. We weren't going to say anything yet, but after the dinner, it just felt right. "It means so much that you're giving us your place, Mary. It's like a sign." Her eyes glistened, but there was something off, something too alert, too eager. I'd raised a child, sat through enough doctor visits to know pregnancy wasn't a feeling you announced without a test, but I didn't call her out, not yet. "Come in," I said, stepping aside, though every instinct screamed to keep the door shut. Ashley breezed past me, her perfume sharp and floral, and set her purse on the kitchen counter like she owned the place. She opened my fridge, pulled out a can of LaCroix, and popped it open without asking, taking a long sip. I watched, my jaw tight. No hesitation, no checking the label for caffeine or carbonation. The way a newly pregnant woman might. She wasn't pregnant. I knew it the moment she said it, and the realization settled over me like frost. Ashley wandered into the living room, her heels clicking on the hardwood, her eyes scanning every corner. "This place has so much potential," she said, running a finger along the bookshelf George built. "We're thinking a crib right here, maybe some built-in shelves. This old thing," she tapped the oak, "we can donate it, right? It's a bit outdated." I swallowed, my throat burning. That bookshelf was George's pride, hammered together with his own hands 30 years ago. I didn't answer, just followed her, my arms crossed. As she moved through my home like a realtor staging a sale, she drifted to the hallway, pausing at my sewing room door. "This'll be perfect for the nursery," she said, gesturing inside. "We'll need to clear out the clutter, though. Babies need calm. You know. And at your age, Mary, climbing stairs all day might get tough." Her smile was all teeth, her words dripping with concern that wasn't real. I stood in the doorway, my heart pounding, remembering the nights I'd spent in that room, stitching quilts for Daniel's bed, hemming his jeans, dreaming of the day he'd bring his own kids here to visit, not to take it away. "When did the doctor confirm it?" I asked, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. Ashley blinked, caught off guard, then laughed, a quick, nervous sound. "Oh, it's early. You know, too early for tests. I just feel it." She waved a hand, dismissing the question. "We're going Monday. Though you'll be the first to know. Obviously. Obviously." The word hit me like a slap, sharp and condescending. I nodded, keeping my face blank. But inside, I was waking up, seeing her for what she was. She went back to the living room, plopping onto my couch, scrolling through her phone while her purse sat open on the counter. I glanced at it, noticing a manila folder peeking out. The corner labeled with a floor plan. My floor plan. My pulse quickened. When Ashley excused herself to the bathroom, I moved fast, slipping the folder out just enough to see. It was a layout of my apartment, marked with notes crib here, new paint there, and a printed Zillow estimate of the current value, circled in red. They weren't planning to live here. They were flipping it, maybe already had a buyer in mind. My home, reduced to a dollar sign. I snapped a photo with my phone, my hand steady now, and slid the folder back before Ashley returned. She didn't notice, just kept talking about paint swatches and baby names, her voice a cheerful hum. "You want to stay for dinner?" I asked, surprising myself. Her eyes widened, then softened. "Oh, Mary, that'd be so nice. Should I call Daniel?" I shook my head. "No, just us." I heated up some frozen lasagna, poured her a glass of wine I knew was a little stale, and watched her eat, her guard down, her smile easy. She thought she had me. Thought I was the same old Mary who'd nod and go along. When she left around 8, still chatting about nursery colours, I locked the door behind her and pushed my heavy sewing machine in front of it, not because I was scared, but because I needed to feel in control. I opened my phone, saved the photo of her documents to a folder I labelled Truth, and sat back down at the kitchen table. The lavender curtains swayed in the evening breeze, and I thought of George. How he'd say, "Mary, you've got more fight in you than you know." I wasn't just fighting for my apartment anymore. I was fighting for myself, for the woman I had forgotten I could be. I remembered a moment from years ago, 2001, when Daniel was 19 and got in trouble at college, losing his scholarship. I'd worked extra shifts at the library to cover his tuition. My hands sore from shelving books, my heart full because I thought it was for him. I'd sat in the same kitchen, under the same light, and told myself it was worth it. Now I wasn't so sure. Ashley's folder, her fake pregnancy, Daniel's silence, they weren't just taking my home. They were rewriting my story, and I'd let them get this far, but no more. I picked up my notebook, wrote October 18th. Ashley came by, lied about pregnancy, found floor plan and Zillow estimate. Then I added, "I'm not done yet." The words looked strong on the page, like a promise. I didn't know what came next, but I knew I wasn't the woman who'd nodded at that dinner. I was waking up, and Ashley, with her perfect smile and her lies, had no idea what she'd just started. The quiet of my apartment wrapped around me like an old quilt, familiar but no longer warm. It was late evening, a few days after Ashley's visit, her fake pregnancy, and that manila folder of floor plans still burning in my mind. I sat in the living room, the glow of a single lamp casting shadows on the walls of my Columbus, Ohio, home. The lavender curtains hung still, their faint scent a whisper of better days. My notebook lay open on the coffee table, its pages filled with shaky notes. October 18th. Ashley lied. Found Zillow estimate. Proof I was still here, still fighting, even if my heart felt like it was breaking all over again. I looked at the oak bookshelf George built, its shelves heavy with photos and memories, and felt a pull to go back, to remember when this apartment was a home, not a battleground. I stood, my knees creaking, and walked to the bookshelf, my fingers brushing the worn wood. George's hands had shaped this, hammering nails in the fall of 1985, his flannel shirt dusted with sawdust as he grinned at me. "Mary, this'll hold our whole life," he'd said, and I'd believed him. Now, I picked up a photo album, its leather cover soft from years of handling, and settled back on the couch, the weight of it grounding me. I opened it, and there we were, George, Daniel, and me, frozen in moments I thought would last forever. Each picture was a door to the past, and I stepped through, letting the memories wash over me, even if they hurt. The first photo was from 1990, a church picnic at Alum Creek Park, just outside Columbus. George stood by the grill, a hot dog in one hand, his grin wide under a Reds cap. I was next to him, laughing as Daniel, 7 years old, smeared ketchup on his shirt, his gap-toothed smile bright as the summer sun. We'd spent that day playing frisbee, eating potato salad, and singing hymns with the congregation, the air thick with the smell of charcoal and cut grass. I could still hear George's voice, low and warm, as he leaned close and said, "Mary, we're the luckiest folks alive. Aren't we?" I'd nodded, my heart full, believing nothing could break us. I turned the page, and there was Daniel at 10, in his Little League uniform, holding a trophy after his team won a game. I'd sat in the bleachers that day, cheering until my throat was hoarse. George beside me with a thermos of Folgers coffee, his arm around my shoulders. "That's our boy," he'd said, pride in every word. I'd worked extra shifts at the library to buy Daniel's uniform. My hands sore from shelving books, but it was worth it to see him run across that field, his smile brighter than the stadium lights. I thought I was building a future for him, a life where he'd always know he was loved. Another photo. 1995 showed us painting this very apartment, the walls still bare, the smell of fresh paint sharp in the air. George was on a ladder, a streak of white on his cheek, while Daniel, 12, danced around with a roller, singing along to Moon River on our old radio. I'd laughed, snapping the picture, and George had pulled me into a hug, paint smearing on my apron. "This is our castle. Mary," he'd said, "and you're the queen." Daniel had groaned. "Gross, Dad," but he'd hugged us both, his skinny arms tight around us. That night, we'd sat on the floor, eating pizza from a box, dreaming about the years ahead, Daniel's college, our retirement, maybe a trip to the Grand Canyon. I thought we'd always be that family, painting walls, singing songs, holding each other close. I closed the album, my chest tight, and leaned back, the quilt slipping off my lap. Those memories were so vivid, so full of love, but they made the present sting even more. How had we gone from that to this, from pizza nights and Little League games to Daniel clinking his glass, declaring my home his, and Ashley plotting to sell it out from under me? I thought of her visit, her hand on her stomach, her lie about a baby that didn't exist. I thought of the Zillow estimate in her purse, the cold calculation in her eyes. And Daniel, where was he in all this? Why hadn't he called, texted, anything? Was he part of her plan, or had I lost him to her completely? I stood, pacing the living room, the hardwood cool under my bare feet. The lavender curtains swayed as a breeze slipped through the window, and I caught a glimpse of the Columbus skyline, its lights twinkling like distant stars. I wanted to call Daniel, to demand answers, to beg him to be my boy again. But I knew it wouldn't change a thing. He'd made his choice, and Ashley had shown me exactly who she was. Still, the weight of it, the years of sacrifice, the love I'd poured into him pressed down on me, making it hard to breathe. I thought back to 2001 when Daniel was 19 and got in trouble at Ohio State, losing his scholarship after a semester of skipped classes and late nights. He'd come home, head down, and said, "I messed up, Mom." I'd sat him down at this kitchen table, made him a grilled cheese sandwich, and told him we'd figure it out. I took on extra hours at the library, my back aching from hauling carts, my savings dwindling to cover his tuition. "You're worth it," I'd told him, and he'd hugged me, his voice thick. "I'll make you proud." Mom, I believed him, believed every late shift, every missed coffee with Joan, was building a future for my son. Now, sir, I wondered if he'd ever meant it, or if I'd been blind to who he was becoming. I sank back onto the couch, the photo album still in my lap, and whispered to the empty room, "George, where did I go wrong?" I could almost hear his voice, steady as ever. "Mary, you didn't. You loved him, that's all." But loving Daniel hadn't been enough, not when he stood in that restaurant, his eyes avoiding mine, his words cutting me out of my own life. I thought of the power of attorney, that paper I'd signed in the hospital, trusting him to care for me. It wasn't just a document, it was a betrayal, a crack in the foundation of everything I'd believed about my son. I opened the album again, flipping to a picture from Daniel's wedding, 2015. Ashley stood in her white dress, her smile perfect, her arm linked with Daniel's. I'd paid for the flowers, half the catering, even the extra chairs when her guest list grew. I'd thought she was a blessing, a girl who'd love my boy the way I did. At the reception, she'd hugged me, her perfume sharp, and said, "You're the best mum-in-law, Mary." I'd smiled, my heart full, thinking we'd be a family. Now, That memory felt like a lie. Her words as hollow as her pregnancy claim. I closed the album, my hands trembling, and stood, walking to the kitchen. The clock ticked, the fridge hummed, and outside, a car rolled by, its headlights flashing across the lavender curtains. I poured a glass of water, the cold shocking my throat, and sat back down, my notebook staring at me. I picked up my pen, writing, October 19th, thinking about Daniel, George, the past. I gave him everything, but he wants more. I can't let him take me too. The words looked raw, but they were true, and writing them felt like claiming a piece of myself back. I thought of George again, his voice in my head, clear as the day he left. Mary, you're the strongest person I know, he'd said, his hand weak in mine at the hospital. Don't ever forget that. I'd spent years trying to live up to those words, raising Daniel alone, keeping this apartment alive with love and elbow grease. But now, I was losing it, not just the apartment, but the idea of the family I'd fought for. I wanted to cry, to let the tears wash away the pain, but they wouldn't come. Instead, I felt a spark, the same one I'd felt when I snapped that photo of Ashley's folder. It was small, but it was there, and it was mine. I stood, walking to the bookshelf one last time, and picked up a photo of George and me, taken in this living room. 1987, both of us holding glasses of cheap wine, laughing. What do I do? George, I whispered, my voice breaking. The silence answered, but it wasn't empty. It was full of him, of the life we'd built, of the strength he'd always seen in me. I set the photo down, my fingers lingering on the frame, and made a decision. I didn't know how, but I was going to fight not with shouts or tears, but with the quiet, steady resolve that had carried me through every storm. I opened my notebook again, writing, I'm not done. George wouldn't want me to be. Then I closed it, the sound sharp in the quiet room. The lavender curtains swayed, the bookshelf stood firm, and somewhere outside, Columbus slept under a blanket of stars. I wasn't sure what came next, but I knew one thing: I wasn't the woman who'd sat silent at that dinner. I was Mary Harper, and I was still here, still fighting, still worth saving. The morning light filtered through my lavender curtains, soft and grey, like the world was holding its breath. It was a week after my 61st birthday, a week since Daniel and Ashley turned my world upside down at that restaurant in Columbus, Ohio. I sat at my kitchen table, a half-empty mug of Folgers coffee in my hands, the smell familiar but no longer comforting. My notebook lay open, its pages a map of my fight to stay myself, notes about Ashley's lies. The Zillow estimate in her purse, the power of attorney I'd signed in a haze. October 22nd. I'd written last night, I'm not done. George wouldn't want me to be. But the words felt braver than I did. And the apartment, with its creaky floors and oak bookshelf, felt more like a cage than a home. I couldn't shake Ashley's visit, her fake pregnancy, her casual dismissal of the bookshelf George built. I kept seeing that folder in her purse, the floor plan of my apartment, marked up like it was already theirs. And Daniel, his silence was louder than any words. I hadn't heard from him since the dinner. Not a call, not a text, just the echo of his voice saying, Mom doesn't need all this space. I wanted to believe there was still good in him, the boy who'd hugged me after Little League games. But every day that passed made that hope feel thinner, like a thread about to snap. I needed someone to talk to, someone who'd understand without judging, who'd see the Mary I was trying to hold on to. Joan, my friend from church, was too close to the situation, and I wasn't ready to face her questions after Ashley's Instagram lies. So I picked up my phone, my fingers hesitating, and dialed Iris. Iris Mitchell, my old friend from the library days, now lived out in the suburbs, tending her rose garden and dodging texts from her ex-husband. She'd always had a way of cutting through the fog, her voice steady as the Ohio River, and I needed that now more than ever. The phone rang twice before she answered, her voice warm as the Lipton tea she sipped every morning. "Mary Harper." "What's got you calling at the crack of dawn?" she said, a smile in her tone. I glanced at the clock, 6:11 a.m., and winced. "I'm sorry, Iris," I said, my voice shaky. I didn't realize it was so early. I need to talk." She didn't miss a beat. "Talk to me, honey," she said, and I could hear her settling into her porch swing, the creak of wood familiar from visits years ago. I told her everything, the words spilling out like water from a cracked pitcher, the birthday dinner, Daniel's announcement, Ashley's fake pregnancy, the power of attorney, the Zillow estimate. My voice broke when I said, "They want my home, Iris." They didn't ask, just decided. And that paper is like Daniel's been planning this, like I'm not even his mother anymore. I stopped, my throat tight, waiting for her to say something. Anything. Iris was quiet for a moment, the kind of quiet that feels like she's weighing every word. Then she spoke, her voice low but firm. "Mary, listen to me. You're not losing your mind, and you're not alone." I went through something like this with my brother years ago. He sweet-talked me into signing over our family's land, said it was for our future. Next thing I knew, it was sold, and I got nothing but excuses. I lost everything because I trusted family. You can't let them do that to you. Her words hit me like a gust of cold air, sharp but clearing. "But Daniel's my son," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "How do I fight my own son?" Iris sighed, the sound heavy with understanding. "He's not your son right now, Mary. He's a man making choices, and those choices don't include you. Family isn't always blood, honey. It's the people who see you, who fight for you, and you've got to fight for yourself now." I leaned back in my chair, the kitchen table cool under my arms. The lavender curtains swayed in a morning breeze. And I thought of George, how he'd say, "Mary, you're the strongest person I know." I wanted to believe him, to believe Iris, but the weight of losing Daniel felt like losing George all over again. "What do I do?" "Iris," I asked, "I can't just give them my home, but I don't know how to stop them." Iris's voice brightened, like she'd been waiting for this. "You don't give it to them, and you don't let them take it. You're sitting on a valuable property, Mary, and they know it. I'm retired, but I still have contacts real estate folks who deal in private sales. Cash buyers, no public listings. We can sell your apartment quietly, get you out before they realize you're onto them. You'll get a little less, but it'll keep them from meddling or dragging you into court." "What do you say?" I blinked, the idea so bold it stole my breath. "Sell my apartment, the place where George and I painted walls, where Daniel took his first steps, where I'd patched leaks and sewn curtains under a flickering lamp." It felt like cutting out a piece of my heart. But then I thought of Ashley, walking through my home like it was hers, and Daniel, silent as a stone. This wasn't my home anymore, not in their eyes. Maybe it was time to let it go, to find a new place where I could be Mary again. Not just a mother or a deed. "I don't know, Iris," I said, my voice trembling. "It's all I have left of George, of Daniel. What if I'm making a mistake?" Iris's porch swing creaked, and I could picture her. Grey hair tucked behind her ears, her eyes sharp. "You're not making a mistake. Mary, you're saving yourself. George would want you to live, not to hold on to a place that's hurting you. And Daniel, he's made his bed. You don't owe him your life." Her words sank in, steadying me like a hand on my shoulder. I thought back to 1987, a memory that flickered like an old film. George and I were in this kitchen, dancing to Moon River on the radio, Daniel asleep in his crib. George had whispered, We're going to have a good life here, Mary. And I'd believed him. But that life was gone. And holding on to these walls wouldn't bring it back. Iris was right. I had to live. Not just for George, not for Daniel, but for me. Okay, I said finally, my voice stronger. Let's do it. Sell it. Quietly, I trust you. Iris laughed, a warm, relieved sound. That's my girl. I'll make some calls today. Find a buyer who won't ask questions. You start thinking about where you want to go next. Somewhere peaceful. Maybe by Lake Erie, where you can plant that lavender you love. I smiled. The first real smile in days. Lake Erie sounds nice, I said. Thank you. Iris, I don't know what I'd do without you. You'd figure it out, she said. But I'm glad you don't have to. Now get some rest and call me tomorrow. We've got work to do. I hung up, the phone warm in my hand, and felt a shift, like a door cracking open. The apartment was quiet, the clock ticking, the fridge humming, but it didn't feel as heavy anymore. I looked at the bookshelf, the photos of George and Daniel, and whispered, I'm trying, George. I'm trying to be strong. That afternoon, I started playing along. Keeping Daniel and Ashley in the dark, I texted Daniel, short and friendly, hope you're doing okay. Let's talk soon. No reply. But I didn't expect one. I liked one of Ashley's Instagram posts. A photo of a nursery crib with a caption about new beginnings. My thumb hovered over the heart button, my stomach twisting. But I pressed it, knowing they needed to think I was still the same old Mary, soft and agreeable. Behind the scenes, I was anything but. I pulled out my notebook. Writing, October 22nd. Talk to Iris, selling the apartment, private buyer, Lake Erie. The words looked like a plan, a lifeline. I thought of a cabin by the lake, the sound of waves, the smell of lavender in a new garden. It wasn't just an escape, it was a chance to start over, to be the woman George always saw in me. I closed the notebook, the lavender curtains catching the fading light, and felt a spark of hope, small but steady, like a candle in the dark. If this story's speaking to you, I hope you'll hit that subscribe button to keep up with my journey. I'm just a woman at 61 learning to find my way, and your support means the world. In the comments, please share who's been that one person who helped you stand tall when you felt lost. Your stories are a gift, and I'd love to hear them. The October air in Columbus, Ohio, carried a chill that seeped into my bones, but it was nothing compared to the cold I felt inside. It was 10 days since my 61st birthday, a week since I'd sat in this kitchen, pouring my heart out to Iris over the phone, promising to sell my apartment before Daniel and Ashley could take it. My notebook, open on the table, was a lifeline, its pages filled with notes. October 23rd. Iris found a buyer. Cash sale. Closing soon. Proof I was fighting back, even if my heart ached with every step. The lavender curtains hung still in the morning light, their soft purple a faint echo of the home this place used to be. But now, with every creak of the floorboards, every shadow on the oak bookshelf George built, I felt like a guest in my own life, waiting for the next blow. That blow came not with a knock, but with a buzz from my phone, sitting beside my half-drunk mug of Folgers coffee. I'd been avoiding it, knowing Ashley's Instagram was a minefield of lies. But the notification was from Joan, my friend from church, and my stomach twisted. Mary, call me, saw something online. Her text read, simple but urgent. I set the mug down, my hands unsteady, and opened Instagram, bracing myself. There it was, pinned at the top of Ashley's profile, a video titled "When Family Betrays You, a Pregnancy Without a Home." The thumbnail showed Ashley, eyes glistening, standing in front of my living room, my lavender curtains and bookshelf in the background. My heart sank like a stone. I pressed play, the sound tinny through my phone's speaker. Ashley's voice was soft, trembling with practiced emotion. "We thought we were building a family," she said, a hand on her stomach. "But sometimes, the people you love most let you down." The camera panned to my couch, my coffee table, my life, set to slow acoustic music that made it all feel like a movie. "We were promised a home for our baby," she continued, "but now we're facing a future with nowhere to go." The video cut to her wiping a tear, then to a shot of a crib in a store. The caption flashing, "Dreams on hold." It ended with text, "Please keep us in your prayers, #family betrayal." I stared at the screen, my breath shallow. Over 4,000 likes, hundreds of comments. How could a mother do this, one read? "Disgusting boomer hoarder." Said another, "You don't deserve this." Ashley, "Stay strong. My home, my story, twisted into a lie for strangers to judge." I scrolled, each comment a needle in my chest, until I couldn't anymore. I set the phone down, my hands shaking, and looked at the bookshelf. George's photo staring back. "They're making me the villain." "George," I whispered, "what do I do?" The phone buzzed again, Shun calling now. I hesitated, afraid she'd believe Ashley's story. But Joan had known me for 20 years, through George's illness, through Daniel's teenage troubles. I answered, my voice barely there. "Joan," I said, "you saw it, didn't you?" "Oh, Mary," she said, her voice thick with worry. "I did, and I'm so sorry. That video, it's all over my feed. People are saying awful things. Are you okay?" I swallowed, tears burning my eyes. "No," I admitted. "They're lying, Joan. They never asked me about the apartment. They just announced it. Like I don't matter. And now this video, making it look like I'm throwing them out." Joan was quiet for a moment, then said, "I had a feeling something wasn't right at that dinner. Daniel's speech, Ashley's phone, it felt staged, but, Mary, why didn't you tell me sooner I'd have been here?" Her words were a lifeline, but they also stung. I hadn't told her because I was ashamed, afraid she'd think I'd failed as a mother. I didn't know how. I said, "It's my son. Joan, how do I say my son's doing this to me? You say it because it's true." She said, her voice firm but kind, "I've known you since we were sneaking coffee at church potlucks. Mary, you're no villain. You've given Daniel everything, his college, his wedding, all of it. If he's letting Ashley pull this, that's on him, not you. What do you need from me?" I closed my eyes, grateful for her, for the reminder that I wasn't alone. "Just believe me," I said, "and maybe tell the others at church the truth. I can't fight this on my own." "I will." Joan promised. "I'm having lunch with Betty and Frank tomorrow. I'll set them straight. Don't you worry. And, Mary, you're stronger than you know. George always said so." I smiled through tears, remembering George's voice. "Mary, you're the strongest person I know." "Thank you, Joan," I said. "I'm trying." After we hung up, I sat there, the phone dark, the video's words looping in my head. I thought back to 1998, a memory that rose unbidden. Daniel was 15, struggling in school, and I'd found him crying in his room, saying he wasn't good enough. I'd sat on his bed, smoothed his hair, and said, "You're enough, sweetheart. You'll always be enough." I'd meant it with every fiber of my being. But now, I wondered if he'd ever believed me, or if he'd grown into someone who needed more money, more status, more than I could give. The phone buzzed again. A new notification. Another comment on Ashley's video. "Your mother-in-law's heartless. You deserve better." I turned the phone face down, my chest tight. I walked to the bookshelf, picking up a photo of George and me from 1987, dancing in this living room to Moon River. our laughter caught in the flash. "I'm trying. George," I whispered. "But it hurts." The silence answered, but it was full of him, of the love we'd built here, of the strength he'd always seen in me. I opened my notebook. Writing. October 24. Ashley's video. Lies about me. Joan believes me. I'm not alone. The words steadied me, like a hand on my back. I thought of Iris, working to find a buyer for the apartment, and the cabin by Lake Erie she'd mentioned, a place where I could plant lavender and listen to the waves. It wasn't just an escape, it was a new beginning, a chance to be Mary again, not just a mother or a target. That afternoon, I got another text, this time from an unknown number. "Mary, it's Linda from church. Saw Ashley's video. Is it true you're kicking them out?" My heart sank, but I didn't reply. Instead, I called Joan again, my voice steadier now. Linda texted. I said, "She's buying Ashley's story." Joan sighed. "I'll talk to her. Mary, she's just confused. You focus on you." "What's next? Iris is helping me sell the place," I said, the words feeling real for the first time. "I'm leaving, Joan, starting over, somewhere new." Joan was quiet, then said, "Good for you, honey. You deserve that. And don't let those comments get to you. They don't know you like I do." I smiled, tears falling now. But they were lighter, like rain after a long drought. "Thank you," I said. "You're a gift." Joan. I hung up, looking around the apartment, the lavender curtains, the bookshelf, the kitchen table. They were still here, but they weren't mine anymore, not in the way they used to be. I thought of a moment from 2005 when George was sick, and I'd sat in this kitchen, praying for a miracle. Daniel had hugged me, saying, "We'll get through this." Mom, I'd believed him, believed we were a team. Now, I was on my own, but I wasn't helpless. Joan's belief, Iris's plan, George's memory, they were my team now. And I was ready to fight. I picked up my notebook, writing, "I'm leaving, not running, choosing me." The words felt like a vow, a promise to the woman I was becoming. I closed the notebook, the lavender curtains catching the fading light, and felt a spark of defiance, bright and fierce. Ashley's video could hurt, but it couldn't break me. I was Mary Harper, and I was still here, still standing, still worth fighting for. The morning light in my Columbus, Ohio, apartment felt different now. Less like a comfort and more like a signal to move. It was 2 weeks after my 61st birthday, a week since Ashley's Instagram video painted me as a heartless mother, and a few days since Iris's voice over the phone gave me a spark of hope. My kitchen table, once a place for George's pancakes and Daniel's homework, was now my war room, covered with my notebook, a stack of legal papers, and a half-drunk mug of Folgers coffee. October 27th. I'd written last night, "Iris says the buyer's ready." Joan spreading the truth. "I'm not alone." The words were my anchor, proof I was taking back my life, even if every step felt like walking on glass. The lavender curtains swayed in a cool October breeze, their scent faint but steady, reminding me of the home this place used to be. I looked at the oak bookshelf George built, its shelves holding photos that once warmed my heart. George in his Reds cap, Daniel with his Little League trophy, me smiling like I had forever. Now they were reminders of what I was fighting for, not just this apartment, but the right to be Mary Harper, not just a mother or a name on a deed. Ashley's video still stung, its comments heartless, hoarder looping in my mind, but Joan's belief and Iris's plan were stronger, pulling me forward. I picked up my phone, my fingers steadier than they'd been in days, and called Iris. She answered on the first ring, her voice bright as the roses she tended in her suburban garden. "Mary, you're up early," she said, the creak of her porch swing in the background. "Got good news for me?" I smiled, a small one, but real. "I'm ready." "Iris," I said, "you said you found a buyer. Tell me what's next." Iris laughed, warm and relieved. "That's my girl. I've got a cash buyer, a retired couple from Dayton, looking for a quiet place in Columbus. No realtor, no public listing, just a handshake deal through my old network. They're offering a fair price, not top dollar, but enough to get you set up somewhere new. I can have the papers ready by next week." "You still thinking Lake Erie?" I nodded, though she couldn't see. "Yeah," I said. "A cabin by the lake, somewhere I can plant lavender and hear the waves. It feels right." "It is right," Iris said, her voice firm. "You're not running. Mary, you're choosing yourself, and that's something most folks don't have the guts to do. I'll send you the buyer's offer today. Start packing what matters, George's photos. Your sewing kit, the stuff that's you. Leave the rest for the new owners." I swallowed. The idea of packing my life into boxes both terrifying and freeing. "Thanks, Iris," I said. "I don't know how to repay you." "You repay me by living," she said, and I could hear her smile. "Call me tomorrow and we'll go over the details." "You've got this, honey." I hung up, the phone warm in my hand, and felt a shift, like a weight lifting. Iris's words echoed George's, "You're the strongest person I know." For the first time, I was starting to believe them. That afternoon, I drove to the community center downtown, a low brick building with a sign that read, "Know your rights" in bold letters. Iris had suggested I talk to someone about protecting myself legally, especially with that power of attorney still in Daniel's name. The center smelled of brewed coffee and paper, a mix that reminded me of my library days. I met Sarah, a volunteer legal advisor with kind eyes and a no-nonsense ponytail, who listened as I told her about the dinner, Ashley's video, and the document I'd signed in the hospital. Sarah leaned back in her chair, her pen tapping a folder. "Mary, you're not the first woman to face this," she said, her voice calm but direct. "Family disputes over property are more common than you think, especially with elders. That power of attorney is a problem, but your lawyer's right, you can revoke it. I'll help you draft the paperwork, and we'll get it notarized today. But you need to be proactive, freeze your accounts, change your passwords, and don't sign anything without reading it twice." I nodded, scribbling notes, her words grounding me. "What about the video?" I asked. "Ashley's making everyone think I'm the bad guy." Sarah sighed, setting her pen down. "Social media's a beast. Mary, it's hard to fight lies online, but you've got truth on your side. Keep record screenshots, texts, that photo you took of her folder. If they try to challenge you in court, those will matter more than likes and comments. And you've got people who believe you. Right? Like your friend Joan." I smiled, thinking of Joan's promise to talk to the church group. "Yeah," I said. "I'm not as alone as I thought." "You're not alone at all," Sarah said, her eyes softening. "I run a support group here for women who've been through this family pressure. Financial abuse. You're welcome to join us. It helps to hear other stories, to know you're not the only one." I hesitated, the idea of sharing my pain with strangers daunting, but her warmth made it feel possible. "I'll think about it," I said. "Thank you." "Sarah, it means a lot." She handed me a stack of forms, her smile encouraging. "You're doing the right thing. Mary, you're not just protecting your assets, you're protecting your future. Call me if you need anything." "Okay." I nodded, clutching the papers like a shield, and left the center feeling lighter, like I'd taken a step toward freedom. Back home, I started packing, not with boxes yet, but with purpose. I called Frank, a quiet man from church who owned a pickup truck and never asked too many questions. "Frank, I said when he answered, "I need help moving some things. Can you come by this weekend?" His voice was gruff but kind. "Sure thing, Mary." "What you got?" I glanced at the bookshelf, the photos, my sewing kit, just the important stuff. I said, "George's tools, some dishes, photo albums. I'm leaving town for a while." He didn't pry, just said, "I'll be there Saturday. You take care." All right, Saturday came. And Frank arrived in his old Ford F-150, the bed scratched from years of hauling. We boxed up George's workshop gear, the heirloom dishes my mother passed down, and the albums from the attic, their leather covers soft under my fingers. Each item was a piece of me, a piece I refused to let Daniel and Ashley claim. Frank worked quietly, his hands steady, and when we finished, he tipped his cap. "You're gonna be okay." "Mary," he said, and I believed him. I kept up the act with Daniel and Ashley, texting Daniel, "Just checking in, hope you're well," and liking another of Ashley's posts, a pastel nursery mood board captioned "Dreams for our little one." My thumb shook as I pressed the heart, but I needed them to think I was still soft, still theirs to push around. Meanwhile, I changed my mailing address to a P.O. box in a nearby town, called the electric company to set a shut-off date, and told the building superintendent I'd be traveling indefinitely. He raised an eyebrow but nodded, scribbling a note. "Don't tell my family anything unless I say so," I added, and he gave me a look that said he understood more than he let on. That night, I sat at the kitchen table, the lavender curtains catching the glow of a streetlight. I opened my notebook. Writing, October 28th. Frank helped pack. Papers with Sarah Dunn. P.O. box set. I'm leaving. Not running. The words felt like a vow, a promise to the woman I was becoming. I thought of a memory from 1993 when George and I took Daniel camping by Lake Erie. We'd sat by a fire, roasting marshmallows, Daniel's laughter mixing with the waves. "This is the best. Mom," he'd said, his face sticky with sugar. I'd thought we'd always have moments like that. Now, I was going back to the lake, not to chase the past, but to build a future. I looked at the bookshelf, George's photo smiling back, and whispered, "I'm doing it, George, for me." The silence answered, full of his love, his belief in me. I wasn't just escaping Daniel and Ashley. I was choosing a life where I could plant lavender, sip tea by the water, and be Mary again. The cabin was waiting, and I was ready. The late afternoon light filtered through my lavender curtains, casting long shadows across the living room of my Columbus, Ohio, apartment. It was 3 weeks since my 61st birthday, a week since I'd packed my most precious belongings with Frank's help, and just days since Iris confirmed the cash sale of my apartment would close in 72 hours. My kitchen table was cluttered with my notebook, a few legal papers from Sarah, and a cooling mug of Folgers coffee. Its familiar smell, a small anchor in the storm of my life. October 30th. I'd written last night, sale closing soon. P.O. box active. Frank moved the boxes. I'm almost ready. The words were a promise, a map to a new life by Lake Erie. But they didn't ease the ache in my chest, the weight of leaving behind the home where George and I had built our dreams. The oak bookshelf stood in the corner, its shelves still holding photos of George's grin, Daniel's Little League days, and me, younger and sure of my place in the world. But this apartment, with its creaky floors and lavender scent, wasn't mine anymore, not in my heart, not with Daniel and Ashley circling like vultures. Ashley's Instagram video, with its lies about my betrayal, still haunted me. The comments heartless, selfish cutting deeper than I'd admit. Joan's support and Iris's plan kept me going. But every night, I lay awake, wondering if I was doing the right thing, cutting ties with my only son. A sharp knock at the door jolted me from my thoughts, loud and insistent, not the polite tap of a neighbor. My heart thudded, my hands gripping the table. I stood, moving quietly to the peephole, and saw Daniel, his face tight, his fist raised to knock again. My breath caught. I hadn't seen him since the birthday dinner, hadn't heard his voice since that clinking glass and his cold. Mom doesn't need all this space. I froze, my hand on the knob, torn between opening the door and staying silent. He knocked again, harder, and called, "Mom, open the door." I didn't move. I knew he had a key, the spare he'd kept since college, but I'd changed the locks 2 days ago, a secret I'd kept even from Iris. I heard the jingle of keys, the scrape of metal, then a pause as the lock refused to turn. Another knock, heavier now. "Mom, I need to talk to you," he said, his voice sharp, edged with frustration. I leaned against the wall, arms folded, my pulse racing. The boy who'd once run to me with scraped knees was gone, replaced by this man who saw me as an obstacle. He kept talking, his voice muffled through the door but clear enough to cut. "Look, you're not answering my texts. And Ashley's freaking out. We need to know what's going on." A pause. Then his tone shifted, harder. "We found out about the realtor, Mom. Iris called someone we know. You're selling the place, are you serious?" I stayed silent, my breath shallow, the weight of his words pressing down. He'd found out, somehow, and the accusation in his voice made my stomach twist. "You're sabotaging your own family," he said, quieter now, like he knew I was listening. "Do you understand that I wanted to open the door, to scream that he was the one sabotaging me? That he and Ashley had planned this from the start, but I didn't. I stood there, the cool wall against my back, and let the silence speak for me. I thought of a memory from 1997, when Daniel was 14, and we'd fought over his sneaking out at night. He'd yelled, "You don't get me, Mom," but later, he'd crept into the kitchen, hugged me, and said, "I'm sorry." I'd held him tight, believing we'd always find our way back. Now, that memory felt like a lie, and the man outside my door wasn't coming to apologize. His voice dropped lower, almost a growl. "If you don't open this door and talk like an adult, I swear to God, I'll do what I have to do legally." The threat hung in the air, cold and final. I heard his footsteps, then a soft scrape, like paper sliding under the door. He left after that, the hallway falling silent, but the weight of his presence lingered. I waited, counting to 10, then knelt to pick up the envelope he'd left, my hands trembling as I opened it. Inside was a typed document, formal and chilling request for transitional occupancy review, signed by a legal assistant from a firm I didn't recognize. A highlighted section read, "Pending potential medical guardianship claim." My blood ran cold. This wasn't just about the apartment. They were building a case to question my competency, to use that old power of attorney against me. I sank to the floor, the paper crinkling in my hands, and felt the room spin. George's photo on the bookshelf watched me, his smile a quiet reminder of the strength he'd always seen in me. But I felt small, like a leaf caught in a storm. I grabbed my phone, dialing Ellen, my lawyer, my fingers fumbling. She answered before the second ring, her voice sharp with concern. "Mary, what's wrong?" I read the document aloud, my voice breaking on guardianship. Ellen sighed, the sound heavy with experience. "They're escalating," she said. "They're trying to scare you, maybe push you into signing something. Don't respond, don't engage. Send me a photo of that paper, and we'll handle it. The sale's almost done. Right, stick to the plan, and they won't have a leg to stand on." "Okay," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Thank you." Ellen. I sent her the photo, my hand shaking, and sat back, the envelope on the table like a snake ready to strike. I thought of Sarah's words at the community center, keep records. Truth matters more than likes. I opened my notebook, writing, October 30th. Daniel came, threatened legal action, left guardianship paper, sent to Ellen. The act of writing grounded me, a small rebellion against their lies. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table, the lavender curtains catching the glow of a streetlight, and opened my notebook again. I didn't write a plan or a list. Instead, I wrote a letter, one I'd never send, to Daniel. My sweet boy, I began, the words spilling out. I gave you everything, my time, my savings, my heart. I stayed up nights when you were sick, worked extra shifts for your college, believed in you when you didn't believe in yourself. Where did I lose you? Was it me? Or was it Ashley? Her promises, her plans, I love you, but I can't let you take me too. I'm choosing myself, not because I want to, but because I have to. I hope one day you understand. I closed the notebook, tears falling now, but they were quiet, not the wrenching sobs I'd feared. I thought of a memory from 2003 when Daniel was 20 and George was in the hospital, his cancer spreading fast. Daniel had sat with me in this kitchen, holding my hand, saying, "We'll get through this, Mom." I'd leaned on him, believing we were a team. Now I was alone but not helpless. Iris, Joan, Sarah, Frank, they were my team, and George's voice, whispering, "You're the strongest person I know," was my guide. I stood, walking to the bookshelf, and picked up a photo of George and me, 1987, dancing to Moon River in this room. "I'm doing it." "George," I whispered, my voice firm, "for me." The silence answered, full of his love, his belief in me. I set the photo down, my fingers lingering, and made a decision. I wasn't opening that door, not for Daniel, not for Ashley, not for their threats. The sale was closing. The cabin by Lake Erie was waiting, and I was ready to go. I opened my notebook one last time, writing, "I'm not afraid anymore. I'm leaving." For me, the words were a vow, a promise to the woman I was becoming. The lavender curtains swayed, the bookshelf stood firm, and outside, Columbus hummed under a blanket of stars. I wasn't running from my son. I was running toward myself, and no one could stop me now. The air by Lake Erie smelled of water and pine, a clean, sharp scent that filled my lungs as I stepped onto the porch of my new cabin. It was early November, 3 weeks since I'd faced Daniel through the locked door of my Columbus apartment. 4 weeks since my 61st birthday turned my world upside down. The sale of my old home had closed 2 days ago. The funds tucked safely in a new account. And now, here I was, 61 years old, starting over in a place I'd never imagined. The cabin, a modest 2-bedroom with weathered shingles and a creaky porch, sat nestled among trees, the lake glinting through the branches like a promise. I stood there, my suitcase at my feet, and exhaled, a deep, shaky breath that felt like I'd been holding it for months. Columbus was 4 hours behind me, its red brick buildings and busy streets a memory now. The lavender curtains, the oak bookshelf George built, the kitchen table where I'd raised Daniel, they belonged to someone else. A young family who'd moved in with no idea of the battles fought in those walls. I'd left a note for them, "Love this place like I did," and walked away. The rumble of my suitcase on the cracked sidewalk, the only sound at 4:35 a.m. Iris had met me 2 towns over, her smile saying everything her words didn't, and handed me a thermos of coffee. "You're free." "Mary," she'd said, and I'd nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. Now, standing on this porch, the weight of that freedom settled over me, both thrilling and terrifying. The cabin was smaller than my apartment, its wood-paneled walls smelling of cedar, the windows drafty but clean. I carried my suitcase inside, setting it by the door, and took in the empty kitchen, its linoleum floor scuffed but sturdy. A single light bulb hung above the sink, casting a soft glow, and I could almost hear George saying, "Mary, this place has good bones. You'll make it yours." I smiled, a small, quiet thing, and felt a flicker of hope, like a candle catching flame. My new neighbor, Claire, showed up an hour later, knocking on the door with a plate of homemade oatmeal cookies wrapped in foil. She was in her late 60s, with silver hair pulled into a loose braid and a laugh that filled the room. "Welcome to the lake, Mary," she said, her voice warm as the cookies she handed me. "I'm Claire, just down the path. Been here a year, making soap in my garage and dodging my ex's emails. You settling in okay?" I took the plate, the smell of oats and brown sugar a comfort, and nodded. "Trying to," I said. "It's a lot." Claire's eyes softened, like she saw more than I was saying. "Starting over's never easy," she said, stepping inside as I gestured to the kitchen table, still bare except for my notebook. "But this place has a way of healing you. The lake, the quiet, it's like a reset button. You got any plans yet?" I sat across from her, breaking a cookie in half, its warmth melting on my fingers. "Not much," I admitted. "Maybe plant some lavender, get to know the area. I just needed somewhere safe," she nodded, taking a bite of her own cookie. "Safe's a good start. You'll find your way." Me. I started my soap business after my divorce, thought it'd keep me busy. Now I'm selling at the farmer's market, meeting folks. You should come by the community center sometime. They've got classes, potlucks, good people. I smiled, her energy infectious. I said, "Thanks, Claire. These cookies are amazing. By the way, old family recipe," she said, winking. "You need anything sugar, a screwdriver, someone to talk to, you know where I am." She left with a wave, her boots crunching on the gravel path, and I sat there, the cookie plate a small gift in a world that felt new and unsteady. Claire's warmth reminded me of Joan, of Iris, of the people who'd become my lifeline when Daniel and Ashley tried to take everything. That afternoon, I unpacked the essentials, George's photo, my sewing kit, the leather-bound albums from the attic. I set the photo on the kitchen counter, George's grin catching the light, and whispered, "We made it. George." I thought of a memory from 1994 when we'd taken Daniel to Lake Erie for a weekend, camping under the stars. He'd been 11 roasting marshmallows, his laughter mixing with the waves. "This is the best, Mom," he'd said, his face sticky with sugar. I'd held that moment close, believing we'd always have more. Now, I was back at the lake, not to chase that past, but to build something new. I stepped outside, the porch creaking under my feet, and walked to the small patch of dirt by the cabin. The soil was hard, but I could see it rows of lavender, their purple blooms swaying in the breeze. I knelt, my hands in the earth, and felt a quiet joy, like I was planting more than flowers. I thought of Sarah's support group at the community center in Columbus. Her words, "You're not the only one." Maybe there was a group here, too, women like me, starting over, finding their way. The idea felt like a seed, small but full of possibility. The next day, I drove to the local co-op, a weathered building with a sign that read, "Lake Erie Goods." Inside, it smelled of apples and fresh bread, and the cashier, a young woman with a nose ring, smiled as I bought seeds for lavender and mint. New around here, she asked, ringing up my purchase. Just moved in, I said. Got a cabin by the lake. She nodded, handing me my change. You'll love it. The sunsets are something else. Come back for the potluck next week. We all bring something. I smiled, tucking the seeds in my purse. I'll think about it, I said, and meant it. Back at the cabin, I found a letter in the mailbox, forwarded from my Columbus P.O. box. The handwriting was familiar, Melissa, my niece, Joan's daughter. I sat on the porch, the lake sparkling in the distance, and opened it. Inside was a photo of a newborn girl, her tiny face scrunched in sleep, and a note. Dear Aunt Mary, meet Lily. If she grows up to be half as strong as you, I'll have done something right. I'm proud of you. Love, Melissa. Tears welled up, not the heavy ones of loss, but the kind that rinse away hurt. I pressed the photo to my chest, thinking of Melissa's quiet loyalty, her text after Ashley's video. I don't buy it. Aunt Mary, you okay? She'd seen through the lies, and now, this letter felt like a hug across the miles. I pinned the photo to the fridge with a sunflower magnet, the cabin's first decoration, and sat at the kitchen table, my notebook open. November 2nd. I wrote, at the cabin, planted seeds, met Claire. Melissa's letter. I'm home. The word home looked strange, but right, like a new dress I was learning to wear. I thought of George, how he'd love this place, the lake's gentle waves, the porch where we could have sipped coffee. You would be proud. George, I whispered, and the silence answered, full of his love. That evening, Claire invited me over for tea. Her small house filled with the scent of lavender soap. We sat on her couch, mugs of celestial seasonings in our hands, and she told me about her divorce, her move here, her soap business. People get bold when money's involved, she said, her eyes sharp. But you didn't let them win. Mary, that makes you dangerous in the best way. I laughed, a real laugh, and it felt like a gift. Dangerous, I said. I'm just trying to keep up. Claire grinned. You're doing more than that. You're living. Keep it up. I walked back to my cabin under a sky full of stars. The lake's hum a soft lullaby. I thought of 2000 when Daniel was 17 and we'd driven to Lake Erie for a day trip. Just the two of us after George's first hospital stay. We'd skipped stones, and he'd said, You're the best, Mom. I'd held that moment close, believing it defined us. Now I let it go, not with anger, but with acceptance. Daniel was gone. But I wasn't. I had Claire, Melissa, this cabin, this life. I sat on the porch, a blanket around my shoulders, and wrote in my notebook. I'm not just surviving, I'm building something new. The words felt like a vow, a promise to the woman I was becoming. The lake shimmered, the trees whispered, and for the first time in years, I felt at peace, like I'd found my place in the world. The November breeze off Lake Erie carried the scent of water and lavender. A gentle reminder that I was home. It was a month since I'd left my Columbus apartment behind, trading its red brick walls and heavy memories for this weathered cabin by the lake. At 61, I was learning to live again, my days filled with small joys, planting lavender in the yard, sipping mint tea on the porch, listening to the waves that seemed to whisper, You're enough. My kitchen table, now a simple pine one I'd found at a local flea market, held my notebook, a photo of George, and a letter from Melissa, my niece, pinned to the fridge with a sunflower magnet. November 10th, I'd written last night, planted more lavender. Claire's teaching me chess. This is home. The words felt like a miracle, proof I'd done more than survive, I'd begun to thrive. The cabin was quiet, its wood-paneled walls glowing in the morning light, the lake glinting through the windows. I stood at the sink, Washing my coffee mug, Folgers. Always Folgers. A nod to the life I'd left and thought of George. His grin in the photo on the counter. We're doing okay. George, I whispered, and the silence answered. Full of his love, Claire, my neighbour, had become a friend. Her oatmeal cookies and sharp wit, a daily gift. Melissa's letter, with its photo of baby Lily, was a reminder that I still had family, even if Daniel and Ashley had chosen a different path. But the past wasn't gone. It lingered, like the faint hum of Moon River in my memory. And today, it came knocking in the form of a slim white package left at my door. I found it after breakfast. No return address. Just a box wrapped in tissue paper and a ribbon. Like a peace offering I hadn't asked for. Inside was a framed sonogram photo and a card signed A and D. My heart skipped, not with hope, but with suspicion. I'd seen this image before Ashley had posted it months ago on Instagram. A stock photo from a pregnancy app, captioned as a vision board. This wasn't real. They'd printed it, framed it, mailed it, thinking it would pull me back. The card read, "Can we start over A and D?" I set it on the counter, untouched, and felt a familiar ache. Not for them, but for the mother I'd been, the one who'd believed in second chances. I sat at the table, my notebook open, and wrote, November 11th. Fake sonogram from Ashley and Daniel. No reply. The word steadied me, a reminder that I wasn't that mother anymore. I thought of a memory from 2007 when Daniel was 24, just engaged to Ashley. We'd sat in my Columbus kitchen, eating homemade apple pie, and he'd said, "She's the one, Mom. You'll love her." I'd hugged him, my heart full, believing we'd be a family. Now, that memory felt like a ghost, and the sonogram was just another lie. Like Ashley's tears in her video. Like Daniel's silence outside my door. I pushed the box aside and picked up my phone, checking my email. There was a message from Ellen, my lawyer, with the subject, Quiet Exit Fund Finalized. My pulse quickened. The fund, named in honor of George, was my way of turning pain into purpose. A trust to help older women escape financial or emotional abuse from family. I'd worked with Ellen to set it up, pouring my savings, the apartment sale proceeds, and my small life insurance policy into it. The email confirmed the paperwork was done, the first deposit allocated, and the board ready to distribute grants. It's official. Mary, Ellen wrote, "You've created something powerful. Call me to celebrate." I smiled, tears prickling my eyes, and opened my notebook to write. Quiet Exit Fund is live, for George, for me, for them. Them, the women like me, who'd lost homes, savings, dignity to family greed. I thought of Sarah's support group in Columbus. Her words, "You're not the only one. This fund was my answer, a way to say, you're not alone, and you can start over." I pulled out a fresh sheet of paper and began a letter. Not to Daniel, but to those women. My pen moving with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. Dear sisters, I wrote, I'm 61, and I've lost more than I thought I could bear my son, my home, the life I planned. But I've learned that no matter your age, you deserve to be seen, to be safe, to be you. I built the Quiet Exit Fund because I know what it's like to feel trapped by the people you love. If you're reading this, know that you're stronger than you think. You can walk away, start again, find your light. Don't let anyone tell you you're too old or too broken. You're enough. Just as you are, I signed it, Mary Harper, and sealed it, knowing Ellen would share it with the fund's board, maybe even publish it for others to read. The act of writing felt like a release, like shedding a heavy coat. I stood, stretching, and walked to the porch, the lake shimmering under a pale sun. The lavender I'd planted was taking root. tiny green sprouts pushing through the soil. I thought of Claire. Her words, "You're dangerous in the best way." I was beginning to believe her. I wasn't just surviving, I was building something, not just for me, but for others. That afternoon, another email arrived. This one from Daniel's old college roommate, Mark, of all people. Mary. He wrote, "I saw what Daniel and Ashley did online. You were right to cut them off. My mom went through something similar with my sister, drained her savings before we could stop it. Wish she'd had your strength. Stay well." I stared at the words, my throat tight. Mark's message was a mirror, showing me I wasn't alone, that my fight was bigger than my own pain. I replied, "Thank you, Mark. Tell your mom she's stronger than she knows." The words echoed my letter, and I felt a connection, like I was part of something larger. Later, I drove to the co-op, picking up groceries and chatting with the cashier, who reminded me about the potluck. "Bring something sweet," she said, grinning. "We're big on desserts." I nodded, thinking of my mother's lemon bars, a recipe I hadn't made in years. Back at the cabin, I found another email, this one from Ashley, titled "Dinner. We'll be in your area this weekend." It read, "Let's talk. No pressure, just family." I deleted it without replying. The sonogram box still on the counter, untouched. There was no family left to talk to, not with them. I sat at the table, opening my notebook, and wrote, November 12th, fund finalized. Wrote the letter, Mark's message, Ashley's email ignored. I'm free. The words felt like a victory. Small, but real. I thought of 2010 when George was gone, and Daniel and I had sat in the Columbus apartment, sorting his papers. He'd hugged me, saying, "We're still a team. Mom." I'd believed him, but now I knew better. My team was Iris, Joan, Claire, Sarah, Melissa, and the women I'd never meet, whose lives my fund might touch. I walked to the porch, a mug of Celestial Seasonings tea in my hands, the lake sparkling under the stars. The lavender sprout stood firm, a promise of blooms to come. I thought of George, his voice. "You're the strongest person I know." I was living up to it, not just for him, but for me. The cabin was my home, my sanctuary, and the fund was my legacy, a way to turn loss into light. I wasn't done, not by a long shot. The spring sun danced across Lake Erie, its light weaving through the trees and spilling onto the porch of my cabin, where I stood barefoot, a mug of mint tea warm in my hands. It was May, 6 months since I'd left my Columbus apartment behind. 6 months since I'd locked the door on Daniel's threats and Ashley's lies. At 61, I'd built a new life here, in this weathered cabin by the lake, where the air smelled of lavender and possibility. My garden, once a patch of hard dirt, now bloomed with purple sprigs, their scent a daily reminder that I'd taken root again. I sipped my tea, grown from the mint I'd planted, and watched a line of birds trace the sky, their wings like a string pulled across the water. For the first time in years, I felt whole, not because the past was gone, but because I'd made peace with it. The cabin had become more than a shelter, it was my home, its wood-paneled walls lined with small touches of me. George's photo on the kitchen counter, Melissa's letter pinned to the fridge, a watercolor of the lake I'd painted in a class at the community center, my notebook, once a lifeline filled with notes of fear and fight, now held softer words, May 15th, painted the lake today. Claire says I'm a natural, potluck tomorrow. The oak bookshelf from Columbus was gone, but I'd found a new one at a flea market, its shelves holding books, a few trinkets, and the weight of a life I was proud to claim. I thought of George, his grin in the photo, and whispered, "We did it. George, he'd love this place, the creaky porch. the waves' gentle hum, the way the sunset turned the lake to gold. I could almost hear him say, "Mary, you're the strongest person I know." And now, I believed it. The past 6 months had been a journey, not just from Columbus to Lake Erie, but from a woman broken by betrayal to one who'd found her light again. Daniel and Ashley were shadows now. Their last attempt, a fake sonogram and an email about dinner unanswered, left behind like the apartment I'd sold. I hadn't heard from them in over 2 months. Not since the final legal notice barred them from contacting me about inheritance or estate matters. They didn't contest the will, didn't try again, and I think they finally understood I was gone, not just physically, but entirely, as if the Mary they'd manipulated had packed her bags and vanished. I didn't hate them, didn't wish them ill. I just didn't need them anymore. My family was here, in the people who saw me Claire. My neighbor with her soap business and sharp laugh, Melissa. My niece with her quiet loyalty, Iris, who'd guided me to this lake, Joan, who'd fought my corner in Columbus. This morning, I'd woken early, the lake's mist curling outside my window, and walked to my garden, checking the lavender and mint. I'd started volunteering at the community center, a cozy building down the road, where I helped organize potlucks and taught a sewing class, passing on the skills I'd honed in my old apartment. The women there, some older, some younger, called me Miss Mary, their smiles a gift I hadn't expected. I joined a painting class too, my watercolors of the lake and trees lining the cabin's walls, each brushstroke a step toward joy. Claire had become a fixture, her visits a highlight of my days. Last night, we'd sat in her living room, playing chess, her swearing I had a killer instinct under my politeness. "You're a shark." "Mary," she'd teased, moving her knight. "No one would guess you're new at this." I'd laughed, moving my bishop, and said, "I'm just keeping up." "Claire, you're the shark." She'd grinned, her silver braid catching the lamplight. "Takes one to know one. You've got a fire in you, girl. Don't ever lose it." Her words stayed with me, a reminder that I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. Today, I was heading to the community center for a potluck, my mother's lemon bars cooling on the counter, their tangy scent filling the kitchen. I'd baked them last night, humming Moon River, a nod to the nights George and I danced in Columbus. The recipe was simple: butter, sugar, lemons, but it felt like a bridge, connecting my past to this new life. I thought of a memory from 1996 when Daniel was 13 and we'd baked those bars for a church bake sale. He'd licked the spoon, grinning, and said, "These are the best, Mom." I'd ruffled his hair, believing we'd always share moments like that. Now, I let the memory go, not with pain, but with gratitude for what it had been. As I packed the lemon bars, a letter arrived, forwarded from my P.O. box. It was from the Quiet Exit Fund's board, confirming that the first grant had been awarded to a woman in Cleveland, helping her escape a family draining her savings. Your vision is changing lives. Mary. The letter read. I reread it, my chest swelling with pride, and tucked it into my notebook. Next to the letter I'd written to other women, "You're enough, just as you are." The fund, named for George, was my legacy, a way to turn my pain into purpose, to offer others the freedom I'd found. I thought of Mark, Daniel's old roommate, who'd emailed after Ashley's video saying, "You were right to cut them off." His words had shown me my fight was bigger than me, part of a story too many lived but few spoke. I'd replied, "Tell your mom she's stronger than she knows," and meant it. The fund was my way of saying that to every woman who needed it, a beacon in the dark. Claire stopped by as I was leaving for the potluck, her arms full of homemade soap bars for the center's raffle. "Lemon bars." "Huh," she said. sniffing the air. You're going to be the star of the show. Mary. I laughed, handing her a Tupperware container. Take some for the road, and don't let me eat all the pie tonight. I've got no self-control. She grinned, tucking the container under her arm. Deal. But you're eating my peach cobbler, no excuses. See you there. Wouldn't miss it, I said, and watched her walk down the gravel path, her braid swinging. I loaded the lemon bars into my car, a used Honda I'd bought with the sale money, and drove to the community centre, the lake sparkling beside me. The centre was alive with chatter, tables groaning with casseroles, pies, and jugs of sweet tea. I set out my bars, greeting familiar faces, the cashier from the co-op, a woman from my sewing class, a man who'd fixed my porch step last week. They didn't know my story, didn't need to. They saw me, and that was enough. After the potluck, I sat on the porch, the lake a mirror for the stars. I thought of 2001 when Daniel was 18 and we'd sat in the Columbus apartment after George's diagnosis, sorting papers, holding each other. We're a team, Mom, he'd said, and I'd believed him. Now, I had a new team, Claire, Melissa, the women at the centre, the ones my fund would help. I opened my notebook, writing. May was 16th. Potluck was a hit. Fund's first grant awarded. I'm living, not just existing. The words felt like a song, a celebration of the woman I'd become. I thought of George. His voice, you're the strongest person I know. I'd lived up to it, not by fighting Daniel or Ashley, but by choosing myself, by building a life that was mine. The cabin, the lavender, the lake, they were my home, my sanctuary. The fund was my legacy, a light for others. I wasn't done, not by a long shot. I'd keep painting, sewing, laughing, living, because at 61, I'd learned that no matter how many times your heart breaks, you can always find new sunshine. I stood, the breeze soft against my skin, and whispered, "Thank you, George." The lake answered, its waves a lullaby, and I knew I was exactly where I was meant to be. The phone buzzed an unknown number, likely Ashley or Daniel, but I didn't look. I powered it off, slid it into a drawer, and stepped back onto the porch. The stars above me, endless, the lavender blooming, and my heart, finally, at peace.